After my grandmother passing, my mother vanished from my life as though her obligations to me had ended with her grief. My brothers, too, drifted away. I continued living alone and attended university. For a girl from my village, this was unheard of, and it attracted envy and resentment from those around me. My village friends, many of whom had not qualified for university or any college, began to whisper behind my back. The rumors were vicious. Some called me a witch, others spread lies that I was selling my body to afford the things I had. It was painful to hear such words, especially when I had worked so hard to get to where I was. Loneliness became my constant companion, though I kept my twin sister as my invisible friend to talk to and cry with. It was in that aching solitude that I decided to let someone into my life, a boyfriend who could be my confidant, my refuge in a world that felt so unkind. He was everything I could have hoped for, tall, dark, and undeniably handsome. His charm was magnetic, his presence commanding, and his love for me genuine. Every girl in the village envied me when we walked hand in hand through the dusty paths, and the local boys watched us with thinly veiled resentment. His visits to the village were a spectacle, especially when he arrived in his father's car, a sleek vehicle that announced his identity before he even stepped out. His father was a respected police officer, which only added to his mystique and kept the murmurs at bay while he was around. He came from a nearby town, a place far more progressive and open-minded than the rigid, judgmental village where I lived. We met during my first year at university, a time when I was struggling to adjust to the demands of my studies while grappling with the constant weight of loneliness. Our connection was instant, and he became a light in my otherwise dark world. His love was a salve for the wounds inflicted by my community's disdain and my family's abandonment. The gossip didn't stop, so I carried that burden silently, knowing his protective nature would lead him to confront them, and I feared that would only make my already fragile existence in the village even more difficult. I let their words slide off me like water off a rock and crying myself to sleep. One of the few people who also supported me was my former teacher, who had been a quiet yet steadfast presence in my life. She had known me since childhood, and we had grown up attending the same church. Even after I left for university, she kept in touch, offering me words of encouragement and advice whenever I needed them. She saw through the lies and the rumors, recognizing the hard-working, determined girl I had always been. She even defended me to others, speaking up for me when my name was dragged through the mud. Her faith in me was unwavering, and she often reminded me that I had the strength to rise above the pettiness and jealousy of the villagers. Years went by, and I was nearing the completion of my studies. That was when my mother reappeared. Her visits became more frequent from South Africa, and she even brought my brothers along who were working by then, often accompanied by an aunt who had always treated me with disdain. My aunt also stayed in South Africa and married to my uncle, my mom's brother. They had a home in the village too. She has friends in the village she always visited as well. The change in their behavior was obvious. They sensed I was about to become something. My academic success, which they had once dismissed, was now drawing them back into my life. But the aunt, as always, couldn't resist her cruel jabs. She would make sly remarks about why I didn't have children yet. "Are you barren? Or are you too busy having abortions?" she would sneer, her insults spreading through the village like wildfire. The gossip only added to the burden I carried. The village girls would giggle and give me strange looks whenever I returned from the university. I never joined them in the forest to collect firewood, not because I thought I was better than them, but because I knew they disliked me. The forest and isolated areas frightened me, especially after a girl secretly warned me about a trap set by some boys to harm me and shame me in agreement with some girls. One fateful day, just before Christmas, my worst fears materialized. The warm hum of holiday preparations filled the village air, but at my home something sinister was brewing. A group of men arrived just as the sun was setting, their faces serious and their voices gruff. They were accompanied by a donkey cart, laden with sacks and blankets, its wooden frame creaking under the weight. They claimed they had come to take me as a wife, their tone leaving no room for negotiation. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to process the enormity of what was happening. The plan was simple yet horrifying: carry me off by force, as was customary in some cases, and marry me off without my consent. They believed that by morning I would have no choice but to accept my fate. Panic surged through me, but I knew I had to stay calm. Running would only provoke them. My mind raced for a solution as the men began to discuss logistics, their voices muffled but their intentions clear. But luck, I had cell phones which were still rare in our village, and the men, oblivious to the power of the device in my hand, didn't understand English, and that gave me an advantage. I stepped into the corner of my home, pretending to pack my belongings. With trembling fingers, I dialed my boyfriend's number. "They've come for me," I whispered, barely able to keep my voice steady. "Stay calm. I'll send help right away." My boyfriend, the son of a respected police officer, assured me that the authorities would arrive soon. In the meantime, I had to keep the men distracted. Summoning every ounce of courage I had, I returned to the room where they waited, forcing a smile that I hoped hid my fear. "I'll cooperate," I told them, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "But I need to prepare for the journey. Someone is bringing me money and supplies to make sure I have everything I need. What kind of alcohol do you like? I can ask them to bring some." They believed I had accepted my fate, and that misplaced trust bought me the precious time I needed. The police stormed in, their presence commanding and unrelenting. The men were caught completely off guard, their protestations drowned out by the officers' authoritative voices. As they were handcuffed and led away, their leader muttered curses under his breath, his earlier bravado replaced by sullen defeat. During their interrogation, the truth spilled out like water from a broken dam. My aunt had approached the old man, painted me as a rebellious girl in need of discipline, and collected a bride price in secret. The old man, convinced of his right to claim me, had planned to perform a ritual that night, a ritual meant to make me forget my dreams of education and fall hopelessly in love with him. The revelation was both horrifying and infuriating. My life, my aspirations, had been reduced to a transaction, a means for my aunt to profit at my expense. The betrayal cut deeper than any insult or gossip I had endured. My mother arrived in a rage I had never seen before, storming into the village and confronting my aunt in front of the community. My mother's voice cut through the murmurs like a blade, her words laced with venom as she unleashed her fury on my aunt. "How dare you sell my daughter like cattle?" my mother spat, her hands trembling with anger. "You have no shame, no decency. If anything had happened to her, you'd be the one in prison." My aunt tried to defend herself, claiming she was only trying to secure a future for me since I was too arrogant to marry anyone from the village. The police ensured that the aunt was questioned thoroughly, though she avoided jail due to her age and the lack of direct evidence tying her to the physical attempt. My mother, though furious with my aunt, suddenly seemed invested in my life again. She apologized profusely for not protecting me and promised to be more present. With the little money I had saved from my part-time job and my boyfriend's unwavering support, I decided to transform my life completely. I installed electricity in my home, ensuring I would never have to rely on kerosene lamps again. I also put in a borehole, which freed me from the dreaded trips to the river. These changes didn't go unnoticed. My neighbors who once mocked me now gathered around the lights in my yard at night, chatting and laughing as though they had always been on my side. I also began investing in farming. I planted maize, vegetables, and even started a small poultry business. With the help of a Mozambican man I hired, who worked with an unmatched sense of loyalty and dedication, the farm flourished. It wasn't long before I was supplying produce to the local market, earning both respect and financial independence. I vowed to continue building my life, not just for myself, but for the next generation of girls in the village. I wanted them to see that it was possible to rise above the limitations imposed by circumstance and society. My story was no longer just about survival. It was about triumph, resilience, and the unyielding power of hope. If you've enjoyed the Oyedwa story and want to see more content like this, please consider subscribing to my channel. Your support really helps in bringing more exciting content your way. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it, and feel free to comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, feedback, and any questions you might have. Thank you for being part of this journey.